I'm even early. Yeah, it's live. We're live. 6:50. I am early. I'm 10 minutes early. Trying to make up for all the other times. Tonight we want to talk about turbo stuff, and I want to talk about exhaust manifolds. And the reason for that, obviously, we're working on our kit, and we're actually having a dedicated manifold done. And so we're excited about that. It's going to take a little bit of time. We were going to do fabricated ones, but I just don't. It's a lot. So maybe just a casting or something. But I get questions all the time, and that doing this casting made me think, hey, look, I look back at all of the videos I've done, and I look back at all the comments and look back at all the questions. Hey, Richard, what happens? You know, you run truck manifolds a lot when you run stuff on the engine dyno with turbos. Are those restrictive? Yes and no. Mostly no. But, you know, I always get confused when people ask these kinds of questions because I don't know their reference point. So yeah, a truck manifold is not what I would pick if I wanted to make 1,500 or 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000 or whatever the number is above that you're wanting to make. I don't know if the person that initially, if the person asking me this is like a no prep guy or something, and a fairly high up no prep guy, or if he's, and I don't think it would be much of those guys asking me what my opinion on that is, but still, I want to know what the reference point is, because yes, a stock exhaust manifold from a truck, obviously, for one, was never designed for a turbo application to begin with, never designed by the OEMs. That being said, it does get all the exhaust out, and then if you channel that exhaust to a turbo, obviously good things happen. If you look closely at the thumbnail, you can also see the Y pipe that I use, that Jason from JT Fab did. That is I think it's 3-inch, might be 2.5. In either case, it doesn't matter because it makes lots of power. And we have it set up with provisions for 2 wastegates. Those are Turbo Smart ones that we normally run, and then a V band so they can put kind of whatever turbo we want on it, and that works well. And it got me thinking, well, what about the Y pipe? Is that going to make power? I'm like, well, let's start with the exhaust manifolds. The Y pipe, we know is going to work, and it'll feed almost whatever size single turbo we want to put on there. But we can talk about the Y pipe later on, like when that would become a restriction. But the truck manifolds are what I want to talk about. And this is kind of an interesting thing, only because when we're talking about the truck manifolds, we also, the way that I run them on the engine dyno with no accessories on it, I just turn them around and, aim them both down and forward. And we made the Y pipe accordingly, and everything works great. A lot of times you can't do that in the vehicle because you have other things that are there. You have accessories, you have alternators, you have power steering, you have other things. So what a lot of guys have done with those truck manifolds is they've cut and welded, maybe changed the angle of the exit, just for packaging. And people being people, want to get into then discussions. Well, if I change the angle, did that hurt the power? Did that hurt the flow? Is it laminar? They start throwing out all these words. I'm like, look, stop. Just stop with that. That's not the thing that we should be talking about. So the thing I like about the truck manifolds is, for me, it's very convenient when we're running stuff, whether it's the LS or small block Chevys or the Magnum, any of those. When we take those, if they have a symmetrical bolt pattern and we can reverse those, that works out really nice, because then we can bring the turbo forward out of the way, because back behind the dyno, we have the dyno behind the engine part of it. We have the bell housing, we have the dyno, and so getting around that and making a single turbo for that. So we would invariably have to mount the turbo off to one side. Doing it up front makes life easy. Also, we can see the turbo from the control room. And we can video it, and it looks great. And you could, it's chock full of turbo goodness. And that's exactly what you want. You want to be able to see all that. You want to see the turbo. Sometimes when you do the turbo and the intercooler and the exhaust, and it just gets busy. But it's very cool to have the turbo there. You can see the spinning blade. I always like to look at it and see how long it spins after we shut the motor off, to see if it keeps going for a long time. For some reason, I equate that to it being better. The ball bearing stuff just tends to have more like more length of time for this, the after spin, I call it. But I do like looking at that. But the truck manifolds are convenient. They face the, they get us having the turbo positioned correctly, have it facing forward. And I haven't yet found the limit of where the power output would be and where that would become restrictive. Because when you're looking at it, particularly if you're, we've run twins with this before, primarily I'd say 80 or 90% of the time when I use the stock truck manifolds, I use this Y pipe and then run a single turbo. We have flanges made so that I can run twins, but I don't do that very often just because we're almost never testing in a position where we need to run twins to have, some, way into 4-digit power levels, except when we did the big bang stuff. Then we were going 12, 13, 14, 1500 plus horsepower, then having 2 turbos that are sized so that we can kind of be in the sweet spot of the turbo, because we're not really caring about response. In fact, we don't want response in that instance on the big bang stuff when we're trying to get a big power number. So all of that works out for the twins and the big turbos and stuff. But normally when we run the truck manifolds, we run it as a single. Now you can put could put our 3584 on there. You can put a 800 horsepower turbo, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. You could put, we have the G35s also, so you could get up to probably 1,000 with those. And then the G42, you get to 1,200 or so at the flywheel. And you can put lots of other stuff. You can put 78, 75s, the VS Racing stuff. You can put Precisions, just any, we've run lots of stuff on these. And all of those work well. And I would say that when you're looking at that assembly and you've got the stock exhaust manifold, stock truck manifolds facing forward going into this kind of Y pipe, neither the truck manifold nor the Y pipe are the restriction in the system. It's almost always the turbo. The turbo is the smallest thing. You look at the flow orifice of the turbo, it's the smallest thing of the other things, particularly if we're sizing the turbo to only make a given amount of power. Like I said, very very rarely are we putting a turbo on there where there's more turbo than we would have motor. Like I've never tried putting a 2,000 horsepower single turbo on this setup where the turbo now can outflow maybe the truck manifolds, maybe the Y pipe, probably the motors, if it's just some kind of hopped up junkyard motor. I don't do that because it's in the testing that I do. I like doing back-to-back structure testing so that we could see and correlate things. Hey, look, with this intake manifold did this, these heads did this, this did this. And when you're going for like lots and lots of power, you're just lucky to get lots and lots of runs and making lots of power and not have other issues, let alone trying to test it 1,500 or 2,000 horsepower. Getting that kind of testing done is just more difficult. For most often, people just put motors together and then run them up at that kind of power level. I don't see a lot of actual testing where they're like, hey, we ran the stock cam and then we ran a low buck truck camshaft or a truck Norris or a hot rod cam or Joe Schmo's super double throwdown Wazi twin turbo cam. I don't see a lot of that. And so usually it's just, hey, we put this motor on and we ran the turbos and we made a bajillion horsepower. The Steve Morris and Nelson and those guys can make a million horsepower with the stuff that they have. But the motors are already done. They're complete. They're ready to go. Put them up there. They got turbos on them that are sized or blow or whatever, and they make lots and lots of power. But that's where you have to get to, in my opinion, to find out where the restriction is for the stock exhaust manifolds. Unfortunately, the problem is when you tell people, yeah, the stock exhaust manifolds are theoretically or probably almost certainly eventually more restrictive than like the tube headers that we've run on a lot of stuff. What that does is trigger people into thinking that at 600 horsepower, I'm losing power. At 700, 800, whatever their number is, that I need the ones that are better. You don't. as we saw in the shootout between where we ran the asymmetrical turbo test, where we ran the Fowler log style manifold and then compared it to the header, and we just did it as an asymmetrical turbo where we just ran the turbo off of one side of the motor and had just a header on the other side. we showed you how much better, because that's an extreme situation. We showed you how much better the response was on the log style manifold. And so even with a header or with a stock exhaust manifold like the truck manifold and a header, you might have the same kind of situation. I don't think it'd be that extreme, but you might have a situation where one of those is better than the other in response, but not quite as good in terms of ultimate power. And the other thing to think about in terms of one of the other reasons I like the stock truck manifolds is they're cast, and because they keep the heat in, they send a lot of the heat energy to the turbo, which is good. Headers tend to radiate that out more because they're thin wall, so the heat will go out, and so they cool off faster. That's not a problem unless you are not getting temperature in the thing before you're utilizing all the boost, and want that kind of response rate. So you can cure some of these problems, particularly guys do it on the track with two-stepping it and putting heat in the turbo before they do it. And a lot of times on these turbo applications at the track, they're managing traction and power anyway. So they're not saying, okay, I need all of the turbo capability and I need all of it and I need it right now. That's not usually the case. Usually is I need part of the turbo response, and then they want the response to get it up on the line. But then, if the thing's making 30 or 40 pounds, they're not hitting it at 30 or 40 pounds off the line normally, because they're having to feed that power in where they have available traction. So there's a lot of things going on there. But for the stock truck manifolds, they work very, very well. I would say that the downside to the truck manifolds, if anything, like we talked about earlier, is a fitment issue and not being able to use them because they hit accessories or power steering or things that might otherwise be in the way. Otherwise, I would say that they're an awesome turbo manifold, cast, flow. They have all the things that you need. No, they're not a dedicated race header. But again, the vast majority of people are not using that. They're not in that range where that becomes a necessity. Stock manifolds work really, really well. The reason that probably more people don't use them is because they don't want to cut and weld that cast steel stuff. They just don't want to reposition it. So other manifolds can, headers can also be problematic, especially in the vehicle. When we did the Big Bang stuff, because I wanted lots of power, we used those. And also on the engine dyno, they configured themselves to fit, fairly well. I thought that we would be fairly high in power. And so I thought, well, maybe the headers will probably be better at 1,500 horsepower. When we did the first Big Bang stuff, I just used shorty headers because I didn't know where we were going to get to. Shorty headers and then pieces of tubing that were not even the same on both sides, and CX Racing turbos, all kinds of things that I wouldn't do now and didn't do later on when we did the other Big Bang stuff where we made even more power. We would have done things differently and better if I were starting doing it now, but I would still probably use headers for those things when we did that kind of testing, just because we're looking at fairly big power. And in that case, we want to see what we can get. Let's see what you guys got going on. Scottish, what's going on? Lunchbox. Why am I always broke? Because it's a car thing, right? It's a car guy thing. Turbo Central, what's going on? Stock manifolds flow pretty good. Yep. Low buck or truck plus for an 8,000 pound Silverado with a 6-liter LQ4 with 243 heads. Well, where do you want your power? Are you more concerned with power above 5,000 or below 5,000? Let's say 800 horsepower stock manifolds efficiently. Yeah, they do work well there. And I would say beyond that, rear mounted with a stock manifold. Yeah, you could do that. You could go backwards. Just use what you have. Tri-Headman Blackheart stainless cast headers. I picked up a good bit of power with them, but I have aftermarket heads with big ports. What do you mean you picked up power with those? Over what, and what is your motor and all of that? And is it a turbo? 4.6 liter twins, always twins. There you go. 99 Silverado, doing a low buck truck. Other than new timing chain, springs, and gaskets, what else might I need? I know I need dowels to hold the lifters too. Not dowels. You need to hold them up during the swap. Okay, I see that. Yes, although you're probably not taking the heads off. Otherwise, on a 99, I probably would, and I probably would change the lifter trays to new stock ones, just so that they hold the lifters up better, and so they don't allow the lifter to rotate, because that can be a problem with really high mileage stuff. But you're probably going to need bigger injectors, and definitely a tune if you're putting a camshaft in. Sold the center engine and transmission. Go into rear wheel drive, swap it. Probably use a 3800 with a 4L60 unless I find a manual trans. Okay, what else can you? I mean, can't you use the 5-speed from the Camaro if you're going to do that? My other concern is the cam bearings coming out 200,000 miles. Anything I could do to help prevent them coming loose? Jimmy's and that one LY6 that I did are the only ones that I've seen that happen on. What's the most you've made with stock manifold? I have to go back and look. I think we've done 4-digit stuff, but I've never tried to make the most that I can. What do you expect the Lowbuck truck cams to be back in stock? Any updates on tunes? Tunes should be ready. I'll have to check and see when the cams are in stock. 6.2 LS twin, VS Racing 7875s or single on that motor. What do you think? Robert, you got to tell me what your desired power level is. Recently got, let's see. Recently got your Lowbuck truck cam. Have you tried running it on a stock tune until I can get the truck up for a proper tune? Drive by cable. I don't think that that's going to idle and stuff very well. I think that that's going to be a problem with a stock tune. Problem is with aftermarket heads, the stock truck manifolds can overhang the ports a good bit. The mast head cathedral ports have this issue, as do others. Are you saying that the port in the head is bigger than the opening in the manifold? A guy that's putting a mast 235 head on has headers. He's not going to run stock manifolds. Just asking a general question. TurboNex Torque Master, how would it perform on a K24? I don't know what the specs are on that turbo. I'd have to look it up. I'm liking the big bore 4.8 you did. Sounds like a fun driving type engine. Yeah. I mean, it sounds good for the RPM, but honestly, when a guy with a 6-liter just works you over because he has a lot more torque a lot more average power production than a big bore 4.8 does, it's just displacement is just better, I think. What brand of header you recommend for my C6 LS2 Corvette, or do you recommend just getting test pipes? Want a little more power, but mainly want more noise. I don't know about headers for chassis specifics. I don't do a lot of that. Richard, if you push 1 bar into an NA motor, load stress on the motor is increased by 50% according to Corky Bell. How will it increase when we push 2 bar or 2.5? I don't know that you can quantify it that way. I don't know what you mean by stress. I don't know where you're talking. Are you talking about thermal loads? Or are you talking about mechanical loads? Because when you add boost to a motor, it doesn't increase. It doesn't, like if you double the power output, you don't double the cylinder pressure. I don't even think you double average cylinder pressure, but you dramatically increase average cylinder pressure. The length of time, the amount and the length of time that you're pushing on the piston. But I don't know what people mean by stress. I think you're associating a personal, like a human thing on the motor, and I just don't think it works like that. Three miles an hour in the 8th with the same boost level, same turbo. What was that increase from, Sean? So that was from the headers compared to what? That something else changed. I have a 69 El Camino with a Mark IV 454, 8-to-1 compression, RPM air gap headers, turbo 400, 283 rear gear. That's got the super highway gears. What cam will work best to make upwards of 400 horsepower and be streetable? Look for something that is like a 224, 232 kind of cam for your 454. Since it's an early one, it's a Mark IV, I'm assuming that it's a flat tappet. So if you get a hydraulic flat tappet that is in that range, I think you'll be happy. Any idea on time frames for the turbo kits? I don't have dates yet. What's the AR number mean on turbos? Which for 400 wheel horsepower? Well, that's not what I would be concerned with. That's going to be a very minor tuning thing. You should be concerned primarily with turbo size for that. So tell me what your combination is, and then I can tell you what turbo to pick, and then I can tell you what AR to pick for that. Have you tested a Trick T4 log? I have not. I'm doing a cam swap on a 99 Silverado. I'm not trying to pull the heads or intake off, just doing springs and timing chain. Should it be okay not changing the lifter trays, 200,000 miles? I don't know. The trays, you can find out when you're doing the cam swap. When you take the rockers off and the push rods off, and you spin and you're doing the cam swap, when you take the timing chain off the cam, spin the cam around and see if all the lifters hold themselves up in place with the stock trays. If they do, probably is pretty good. If you hear them fall back down, probably a good idea to change it. That means they're really, really loose. I won a rev battle against McLaren yesterday, but blew the head gasket. 8,500 RPM. What is a rev battle? How does each guy know how high they revved it? And are people telling the truth when they're doing that? Is the 85 to run on a dry nitrous kit for 125 shot? Yes. Pull a 6-liter from the junkyard. That's good. The port in the head is bigger than the truck manifold. Customer bought a budget turbo kit, wound up changing them out. Picked up 3 miles an hour in the 8th. Spool up improved by 300 RPM on the trans brake. So you're thinking that there was reversion or something going on from overhang in the exhaust? Truck Plus or low buck for a daily driver, 8,000 pound Silverado. Might go turbo in the future. The turbo in the future is not a problem. Like I said, where do you want your power? Are you more concerned about power above 8,000 or above 5,000 or below 5,000? Never thought I'd buy a Dodge, but about a 99 and 3/4. Oh, 3/4, 99. That's 99 and 3/4. 3/4 ton silver or 3/4 ton Saturday with a V10 for what, $1,000? Just order headers. Gonna cry at the pump. Yep. The guy asking about the 3800, it uses a 60-degree V6 bolt pattern, so you can use a tranny out of a similar year S10 or Camaro. We'll look at pull apart. Car is 4,200 pounds with the driver, 4th gen 427 Dart build. Runs 940s. It's 925 from 182 to 121. In the 8th, picked up a touch of 60 foot, no other changes. Same week. Okay. Stress, I mean pistons and connecting rods. He's going to need a really loose converter to make the 450 work if he has a big cam. Yeah, but a 224, 232 cam is not very big. What's the most power you can get from the stock motor with weak rods? What motor are you talking about? Turbonex Torque Master is a 6473 with a 1.0 AR. I was asking how it would perform on a K24 with a Brian Crower Stage 2 and 12.2 to 1. I'm assuming that you have E85 or you're running methanol or something with that high compression. I've never run that turbo, so I don't know anything about it. A 64 is probably fine on a K24. A 6473 seems like a big hot side for a 4-cylinder K24. It's just noise, louder car wins, goofy import stuff. Port of the manifold is 125,000 smaller than the port in the head. I suppose I could have ported the cast iron manifold, but that's a waste of time. Yeah, did the headers that you put on, were they the tubes longer or any of that stuff? Did you put, what, 1 3/4 or something on there? I'd be getting a link with Blackwood. We're kind of looking to getting my tune. I don't see any option on it for the website. If the tune is not listed there, it will be. How do those tuner cars throw flames? They retard the timing and throw a bunch of fuel into it. If you're really cool and you want to do it and have it come out the tailpipe, then you can, it's easy to do on a short exhaust, but you can throw a bunch of fuel out and then ignite spark plugs in the end. I think an 02 F-150 with a Navigator 544 valve and a Lincoln grill. Yeah, those are cool. The mismatch on the mastheads was mostly on the top of the port. The bottom alignment wasn't that bad. Okay. The car had a switch that kills spark and a spark plug in the exhaust. Yeah. How is the back order and the Lubbock truck cam looking like? It's looking like it's still the same. They're still on back order. The spring kits are there, though. But I don't know why you'd want springs without the cam. Should I turbo it, pick up a GT500 blower kit? How much can you get a blower kit for? I would think it'd be a lot cheaper to turbo it, right? Oh, we need a pole, right? We do need a pole. Okay, poll is as follows. Is it possible to make 1,500 horsepower with stock truck manifolds and twin GTX 3584 RS turbos? Will those support 1,500 horsepower? And boom, just like that. Would you see worthwhile gain going from 2-inch primaries versus 1 7/8 on a 416 LS with a supercharger? I don't think it would be a lot. I haven't seen that. What is the power level of the 416? With the speed engineering headers and stainless steel 3-inch exhaust with X-pipe and their muffler that dumps before the axle for $1,000, bolted up effortlessly and sounds amazing. That does sound cool. An X-pipe and mufflers and headers, nice. Someone tried using a Colorado AR5 manual trans behind a truck engine. Would like to see 700 horsepower with one. Has anybody done that? Dan, have you ever run one of those transmissions behind any of the V8 stuff? Bidding on an 04 Silverado. Ooh, an HD, nice. Is it a 6-liter? You can get a full GT500 manifold and blower takeoff for $1,500. Nice. What's your opinion on the Huron Speed hot side kits? Is it worth spending $2,000 if $900 to $1,000 is the goal? I don't know anything about those. I've never tried one. Had to get the Lubbock truck cannon springs from a 6-liter. I had got, okay. Do I need hardened push rods and upgraded rockers? You don't need to do anything to the rockers. If it has a lot of miles on it, trying an upgrade maybe is not a bad idea. You don't need hardened push rods. And I would be more concerned about the length on the push rod, but the stock length is probably fine. 243 heads have 250,000 miles. Truck has 163,000. Okay. Well, you're changing the springs anyway, so that'll be fine. We have sourced a low dollar hardened push rod too. We have some other push rods. We have the BTR stuff, but we found another source. They're not a chromoly push rod, but they are hardened push rods. They step up from the stock one. Champster 800. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of when I'd have to go back and look and see. I did do a test, but I think it was on a GT500 motor at about 800 horsepower with a Kenny Bell on it. And we did 1 3/4, 1 7/8, and 2-inch headers. And the 2-inch headers made the most power. And if I remember right, I think it was like 20. I don't know that I haven't done that exact same test on the LS stuff. 1500, that would be maximum potential, but should get there. Those two turbos will support 1800. Yeah, they'll support more than that. Yeah, they'll support more than 1500. Squirrel intruder. I know I was out today. I had squirrels. They were all over the tree fort. They jumped down or talking to me and stuff. It's a 6-liter. I'll put a truck cam in it. Yeah, 6.0. Rolling in my 6.0. Richard, I'm swapping my iron LS 4.8 LS cam header only to do 419 stroke LS3 all aluminum setup. Do you think I'll have issues with longevity on aluminum versus iron block on a crew cab truck? No, the factory uses aluminum blocks on lots of their stuff, so it's fine. Air 5 is only rated at 260 foot-pounds. I've never used them for anything serious. What is a T5 rated at, like from a Mustang? Don't you have videos that show that stepped headers don't make more power? I have run the stepped headers that we have at West Tech. I don't know that that's an absolute test for step versus non-step. We didn't see anything on the headers that we have. But that doesn't mean that they don't work universally. Just as if I had tested them and they did something, it doesn't mean that they universally do work. Factory 5-liter T5 is rated at 350 foot-pounds factory. They're rated that high. T5 is good to 300. My buddy asked me to build custom headers, and I don't think it'd be worth the price versus horsepower increase. I agree. Not for turbo stuff. Regular, yeah, mine was just a regular T5. It was not a world class. But we ran a lot more than that. I say a lot. We probably ran 450 or something. So a 50% increase with the Vortec on it. But the rising boost curve, and I road race, so I wasn't doing silly drag race, no lift shifts and punching the stereo and that kind of stuff that guys do with us. That's not me. And mine lasted the life of the car. Then we put it in our World Challenge and our Bridgestone supercar, and ran it with again just a a supercharged 5-liter-ish kind of thing. How's our pole doing? Is it possible to make 1,500 horsepower with stock truck manifolds and twin GTX 3584 RS turbos? Who are the 23% thinking that you can't do that? $3,550 was rated to 550. Low buck truck is a Truck Norris or a Texas Beach Chupacabra for a daily. I'd say that's a good cam. Make sure you tune properly. Yeah, those are all good choices. I've never had anybody pick one of those cams and say this is not for me. I don't like it. It's not my cup of tea. I've always been pretty happy with the power curves on those things. I kind of want to ride in Jimmy's truck now in the Tahoe, the Turbo Tahoe, with the 3584 turbo on there and the Truck Plus cam in there and the stock converter. So I kind of want to see how well it does. Can I get the G42 with a T4 flange, or does it come with it? It comes with a V-band. I don't know if we have a T4 version of that. I have to ask Jimmy. On Air 5, any quick shift upgrades for an NV 3500 or 4500 trans? How does a 3500 compare to an AR5? Manuals can usually take 50% over the rated capacity. Not so with automatics. Manuals will start wearing the gears when the two shafts spread apart under load. Yeah. 5.7 LS1 with 799 heads and a Truck Plus, wanting 500 at the wheels. Which turbo? Yeah, 500 at the wheels is not going to get there with that LS1 and those heads and a cam. But 500 at the wheels is really easy to do with the. You should put that 3584 turbo on there. That would easily do 500 at the tire. In fact, Jimmy's made 600 plus with his, and his is a 5.3. If you're wanting to go to 6 or 7 or 8, then put a G42 on it. Not that as you decide, hey, look, you know what I really need is I need more boost and more power. We'll sell you another turbo, or I'll steer you toward another bigger turbo. But if you're going to do that, know going in that just get it now. Transmissions lasting are depending on how they drive. Yeah, how they're driven. Yeah, I agree 100%. That's the same thing as fuel mileage. And people ask about that. Hey, look, well, what if I do this with the fuel mileage? I'm like, are you driving so that you want to get fuel mileage right now? No, not really. I said, well, that's like you can do a 30% change in your fuel mileage from doing that. The thing that you're talking about is a 3% change. Do the big thing first. Drive around. If you're trying to get fuel mileage, do it. Or if you're not, then don't worry about it. Don't think, oh, I'm going to air up my tires when you're driving like a maniac and laying into the throttle at every stoplight. You're not going to get good mileage like that. And it's okay. Just know that, know that going in. The NV4500 is an iron case, right? It's not an aluminum case because the 3500 is the aluminum case one. I think it has beefier internal stuff too, but I thought that I remember reading that. It wouldn't surprise me if I don't really remember that. The tree fort it's getting closer. We should be ready to unveil before too long here. Got some major stuff going today. Got the rails lined up in the right position, the right distance so that they line up with the trolleys and the basket. That's a lot. It's a lot of drilling. You would have been, well, you can't weld it together because then you can never take it apart. That would be a problem. It all just come apart as one thing, and then it'd be hard to deal with. So it's a bolt together thing now. And so it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of drilling through both sides of the rectangular steel tubing and a lot of that stuff. But it's coming together. I was 23%, 1,000. Yes, 1,500 back pressure issue. Anyone? Where do you think that the back pressure issue will be? Do you think that the back pressure issue will be in the truck manifolds? Because it won't be there. Do you think that the back pressure issue will be in the 3584s as twins? It won't be there. My truck has to take a backseat on priorities now. At least I've driven over a year. There you go. Fuel mileage is just as important as 600 horsepower. Both of those things are good. I have an LM7. I'm thinking about boring out to 380 and using a VTR 4-inch stroke crank and rods with a hot rod cam. I'm looking at trick flow 220 heads and LSXR intake manifold. I'm looking for 500 horsepower. You're looking for 500 flywheel horsepower, I'm hoping, because it's not going to be 500 wheel horsepower. Start with a 6-liter if you want 500 horsepower. I already have the block. A 6-liter is a better start than doing that. People want an engine that makes 1,000 horsepower and gets 28 miles per gallon. Math isn't mathing. Do the math on brake-specific fuel consumption at 1,000 horsepower and a 0.55 brake-specific. Yeah, at wide open throttle, it's definitely not going to do that. But I would argue that you could have a motor, a turbo motor, that could make 1,000 horsepower and also get 28 miles per gallon. It'd have to be a really good, slippery, light car, probably, and a mild camshaft, and with a turbo. And I think that happens. I think with a 4.8 and a turbo and a stock or mild camshaft and a manual trans in a 5-liter Mustang or a 240Z or something like that, I think you can get both of those. Not while you're using the 1,000 horsepower though, but when you're just cruising, I think you can. An egg under the gas pedal. That's right. That's Bob Bondurant. And I think if you really wanted to get tricky, what you do is maybe do a 4.8 with a variable cam. That might help you. Todd, what's going on? Working Chico almost every day. Bought an 07 BMW G1200 for the commute. Nice. My buddy's 5.3 LS drag car did 1,200 wheel horsepower on stock manifold. Since we're talking about turbos and manifolds, super impressive. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Someone, somewhere, somehow get 28 miles per gallon out of 1,000 horsepower. Well, the 28 miles per gallon has nothing to do with 1,000 horsepower. Because while you're getting 28 miles per gallon, you're not making 1,000 horsepower. You're making 15 or 16 horsepower. Whatever it takes to make that car go down the road at 60 or 70 miles an hour, whatever you want it to do at. What are your thoughts on the Holley turbo manifold? I watched the video. I thought you said you didn't like it because of the back pressure. No, I do like it. I think it's a really good turbo manifold for lower horsepower stuff. But that's not the same as these two truck manifolds. What they did was merge that together into a common log over on one side. And the flow rate of that log, of those two passages in that log are not dramatic, are not great. And so ultimately, they will become restrictive. Yeah, I think you can make a lot more with two. I'm certain that you can make a lot more with two truck manifolds than you could with that setup. Drove my 400 horsepower Pontiac Grand Prix, 700 miles the other day, 27 miles per gallon. It can also average 8 miles per gallon. 28 miles per gallon it's not a early carbureted like 455 Pontiac Grand Prix, right? It's a late model 3800 supercharged thing or something. Because then I thought you were talking about like a 74 Grand Prix. I'm like, yeah, 27 or 28 miles per gallon, and that's probably not going to happen. C4s are really good. They get really good mileage, actually. My 308 Fox has gotten that kind of mileage with the GT40 Explorer top end. Scrolling. I missed my Fox. Had a loose goal to get it out of storage. Next summer, ASAP, and making it nice again. I know I need to go get mine from Roswellian. We need to get the LS in it. I think the pickup manifolds would become too restrictive before 400, before 1,500. Well, here's why that's not the case. We made 700 with a single Fowler manifold, and I doubt that Fowler manifold flows more than a truck manifold does. So I don't think that that's going to be a problem, because even if the back pressure went up because of the exhaust manifold, even if it went up, it's still going to make the power. You can have back pressure and still have power. It doesn't just all of a sudden shut off. It's possible to make 1,500 horsepower with stock truck manifolds and twin GTX 3584 RS turbos, 7723. GM did a pretty good job with the truck manifolds. I agree. Fixer up here in the garage where I installed my GT40Ps 10 years ago. And then, Crane Cobra 1.7 rockers. Nice. My K36-2 4x4 gets 32 miles per gallon, has no power, takes 4 minutes to reach 65. Is it a diesel? 07 Pontiac ZZP mods. Yeah. Have you done a turbo on a 5.7 Hemi? Not a 2017, an earlier one than that. Think about dropping one in my Jeep. It would be fun, but I want to drive it not a daily, but weekend off-road, running an 8-speed good. I don't know anything about the transmissions. Truck manifold clashes with stock hoods, though, unless you have a truck. Why would the truck manifold have a problem with the hood? You mean going forward? They don't go up. We don't aim them up. I think a 4.8 in a single cab would be exciting on the street as a daily. Would like to find a manual trans. It doesn't cost a second beater car. Yeah. The exhaust studs will break and leak all the boost. Yeah. When you go to build the motor from your wrecking yard motor, you're definitely going to have to fix some of those studs. You don't think the back pressure will be 4-to-1 on the manifolds? No, I don't think it would be anywhere near that. You can actually absolutely get high mileage out of a high horsepower combo. Efficiency means more power per gallon. Build a motor that gets crazy mileage and add boost. Truck manifolds do not fit under the stock Fox hoods, from what I remember. I've never seen a 4-to-1 back pressure relationship. I've never seen that on anything that I can remember. That I can remember data logging. That seems astronomical. Here's something to think about, that we've made 800 flowing both sides of the exhaust into a single one of those GTX 3584 RS turbos using truck manifolds. We've made 800, and the back pressure is a 2-to-1 or a little over 2-to-1. When we put 2 turbos on there, the back pressure is going to go down. Even at 1,500, it's going to go down, because we already made 800 with just one of them. So the back pressure would be lower. It wouldn't be higher. Small block Ford truck upper will fit under my dent side hood, like fitting a Godzilla and a Mustang. 4-to-1 ratios from a turbo in the 60s. Yeah, I've never seen that, even on factory stuff. We've seen 3-to-1, and maybe it was a little more than 3-to-1 when we were just trying to max the turbo out. We were doing a 0.48 hot side T3 from an SVO Mustang or T-Bird or whatever it was. It was that turbo, and we were running it on a B16, and we made 300, and I think we made 340 with we also ran we ran a 4.862 and an 8.2 or something. And then with the biggest hot side, we made 340 at the time with that turbo. But when we had the smaller AR on there, the back pressure was really, really high. Do the turbos somehow end up scavenging at all? I don't know that that's a thing. I just know if you cut the amount of exhaust flow to the turbo in half, even when you raise the power, that the back pressure is going to be down. 1500 seems like a precision number and not a luck number. It's easy to make 1500 horsepower. With turbos, it's easy. That back pressure test is why I want twins. You need to convince your wife. Yeah, Bigfoot. I don't think it'll be. I don't think it would be anywhere near that. In fact, I would be surprised if it's 2-1. I don't think that the stock exhaust manifolds, because you're asking each stock exhaust manifold to feed 750 horsepower worth of exhaust flow. And we already know that it will do that because we've already done that on one side. Turbo Schmerbo, I'm trying to get a local tuner to tune a stock PCM headers, almost impossible. Let's talk low buck truck cams. I really need one. Don't want to pay a Truck Norris. Money goes to other parts. Yeah, we're working on it. Anybody any luck making an equal length exhaust turbo setup for a single turbo? Want a single but chasing a good exhaust note? You want to make the header equal length? I think you're going way out of your way for nothing, but I mean, it looks cool. Ralph, what's going on? %. I can tell you that the exhaust sound with the turbos when we run the truck manifolds is a lot more muted than it is when we run the headers. The headers definitely sound different. Richard, where would be the limit or where the dimension returns should really take effect? I don't know. I don't know where that is. It would be interesting to, I mean, you'd have to test it and see. You'd have to find out where either back pressure or flow or something really starts becoming a problem. But I don't think we know that until we actually ran it. We're going to make and sell an LS manifold, not an intake manifold, an exhaust manifold for our turbo kit. Yeah. Even F1 engine guys can't agree on equal length headers. I know David Weishart doesn't think that equal length headers are the way to go. I don't have a date for you if that's what you're asking for. I don't know. We already made our prototype. We already did all the testing. We're doing production now. Diminishing. Sorry, been up since 11 p.m. Yeah, no worries, man. Don't worry about it. All good. It makes me wonder, Bigfoot, if we would see the same thing that we see with elevated back pressure from turbo sizing, like hot side sizing, where we start to see a loss in power relative to what we would expect from boost or what we see with a bigger turbo from the manifolds. I just don't know when the manifold becomes a problem. If we get to that point before we would start getting to the limit of those turbos too. I mean, those turbos are rated at 900 on a really good small displacement motor. Flow test exhaust side, Westtech have ways to measure correct flow numbers. The flow of the hot side is not going to tell us what a turbo setup does. Manifolds are more durable too. I agree. Headers crack. I've run Holley manifolds for 7 years, off-road abuse on LS1, 0 cracks. I do like that. I mean, the headers that I've been running, or the stock exhaust manifolds that I've been running on the turbo setup for the dyno, I've been doing it for, I'm sure it's been a decade. So here you're going to start selling truck turbo manifolds. We have a turbo kit for trucks and SUVs, a whole kit that includes a manifold. Equal lengths at least looked extra cool in the 5 liters. Yeah, I wouldn't run those because those are wire burners, man. My first E5 5-liter came with Mac ELs. The collector's rusted out, of course. Yeah. I remember putting equal lengths on our World Challenge car when I was driving with the guys from Bear Racing. And I remember putting those were on one of them. And I'm like, these are terrible. These are awful. They need to be unequal length because they're not gaining us any power, but they are burning the plug wires all the time, and we need to not do that. You know, that's way more important. If you have a one cylinder go down and you're World Challenge racing, it's not good. It's not bueno. 77% saying yes. We'll end out our poll. 2-minute warning. Yeah, the turbo manifold came out really nice. Jimmy did the first one, welded it all up. We wanted to make sure that it fit with AC and all that, and that there was, you know, provisions for everything. And I think it came out pretty nice. And again, this turbo kit is not for it's not for no prep guys. It's for prep guys. It's for regular guys. Wouldn't flow bench head porting matching exhaust dynamics? I don't know what you're saying. The Westech doesn't have a flow bench anymore, so that's not there. So I can't do that. And a flow bench flowing an exhaust manifold is not going to tell us what a turbo combination does, if that's what you're trying to get at. I replaced a lot of cracked exhaust manifolds back in the day. Those Buick V6 factory headers rarely cracked, even on turbo cars. Yeah, you can make them solid. They work good. You have a kit now, or you're coming out with one soon. We already have done the kit and tested it, but we did a fabricated manifold. And so now we're gathering together all of the things. So the kit is not ready to sell yet. We've just done all the testing with it. Do you guys use knock sensors on the dyno? On the chassis dyno, definitely, yes. I want to learn how to set them up properly on my 6-liter in case I get bad gas. Well, on the Turbo Tahoe that Jimmy and Joel are doing on all the tuning on, it has the factory knock sensors. And they definitely work. And so we try to make sure that we don't get knock counts. And we did a bunch of pump gas testing initially, but almost always now the thing gets E85. A flow bench if needs something flowed, although flowing exhaust isn't a realistic interpretation of what's going on in the engine. No, I agree, especially on a turbo thing. Like we've flowed exhaust manifolds, and I don't know that other than flowing it and then extrude honing it, flowing it again, and knowing that we got to change, it doesn't really tell me other than it flowed more until we correlate that with then putting it on something and running it and finding out power. I'm not smart enough to know if we do that, what then would happen on a turbo combination. Because when you run a turbo combination, you don't know that the manifold is restrictive or that the turbo is restrictive. You don't know which one of those ultimately would be restrictive. And then if you have a situation where you have the exhaust manifold is restrictive and the turbo is not quite as restrictive yet, and we make the exhaust flow better, then that can be beneficial. But if it's still the turbo and we make the exhaust flow better, is that beneficial? I don't think that it would be. Mine was burning plug wires because the O2 sensor harness ground was loose, causing the EEC to not learn the exhaust, causing the engine to run lean. Headers to get hotter, causing burnt wires. Once I fixed the ground and the EEC learned the exhaust, I never burnt another wire. Measure displacement or volume. Thinking truck manifolds facing forward, weld custom bend so the turbo mounts right in front of the crank would be equal at least to the turbo, like an X-pipe versus stock sound. Yeah, I don't know how that... Ralph, I still don't agree with you. I don't agree with you that the stock exhaust manifold flowing or measuring the stock exhaust manifold is going to tell us whether or not the turbo combination is going to make the power that I had up on the thing. It's not going to tell us that. Truck manifolds facing forward. Okay, we got that. I thought we were talking about truck intake manifolds. No, not truck intake manifolds. We're talking about the truck intake manifold. Definitely could make 1,500 horsepower. It just would take a lot of boost to do it. All right, Bigfoot, go get some sleep, man. We got 1 minute left. The flow rate of the exhaust manifold, like everything, is also going to change with pressure. There. Because we know if we add pressure, it increases the flow. That's how turbo stuff works. That's how a restrictive intake manifold becomes not restrictive, or a throttle body becomes not restrictive when we're blowing through it. Hey, look, it flows a lot more. And on that note, it is time to go. That's the dogs that are telling me it's time to get off. It's been an hour. They know. They have internal clocks. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.